We're living through one of the most disrupted and chaotic times in our history. That doesn't mean that we can't run our finances properly. We've asked Phillip Van Zyl, the CEO and founder of Simple Books, to come in and just unpack what that means and give us some basic tips on healthy financial management. Phillip Van Zyl, it's so great to connect with you in these very strange and unusual times. Welcome to the Heavy Chef Show.
Thanks.
So I want to get straight to it and just talk a little bit about in what way you're a real heavy chef, because you teach people about accounting and you've now written a book about financial management, but you're not an accountant yourself. And in fact, you're a real heavy chef. And I just want to get into the explanation for that and how this came to be.
So what I found by speaking to lots of entrepreneurs is that most entrepreneurs don't come to being entrepreneurs through accounting. They don't study accounting. So I suppose my story is quite typical of most entrepreneurs. I came from a lower middle class upbringing in Joburg. I didn't have entrepreneurial parents, and I was just always entrepreneurial. I was kind of hustling on the playground, buying and selling stuff, and I just knew that was a passion of mine. And only later in life, speaking to other entrepreneurs who are mostly creative sorts, and accounting, studying straight accounting is not a creative pursuit. It's kind of completely left hemisphere, not visionary creative stuff. Certainly when you're studying the basics at university. And so what I found myself is that was really hampering me when I started my first businesses. I had all the creativity and the vision, and I knew where it was going and I knew how it was going to happen. But I was missing a big piece. And so I suppose in teaching, I speak the same language as a lot of entrepreneurs who are in the same situation, where they find themselves running a business and they're just checking if there's money in the bank, and that's their way of seeing whether their business is solvent or not. You know, they don't understand how much money they owed, what their assets are worth, that sort of stuff. So
from a heavy chef's perspective, I think that's great, because it means that you were eating your own food. There was a problem that you leaned into and you learned by doing, essentially. I mean, how was that process? Did you find it easy? Were you naturally intuitive about financial management?
So I've always loved systems. That's part of something. I love systems, and I love seeing how people organize themselves and how people change. So in a way, because I'm curious about systems, part of it was trying to understand the financial system. Now, more recently, you can get some kind of training online, but up until maybe the last 5 years, you either had to go and study accounts at varsity, and that for me would be like, lying on nails. And so there was nothing in between. And another important piece is that, there's stuff online, but it's not a whole system. So you can Google, like, what is a balance sheet? And then you watch it and it's like, what was that? So I had to make it up. I was curious and I tried to work it out. And Excel is an amazing teacher, kind of equivalent spreadsheets. You put the income there, and then you put your expenses, and then you just start hustling and making up formulas and work it out yourself. So it was kind of the school of hard knocks. And fortunately now there's more people who are coming online with training that speaks the language of entrepreneurs who are not accountants. And that's really what you and I and kind of the whole Heavy Chef community has set out to do with this guide, is to speak entrepreneur language and explain what are sometimes seemingly complicated concepts just in terms of what they are, which is fairly simple concepts.
And let's just talk a little bit about the book and the reason for creating this very practical, easy to understand book. I mean, I think in terms of the concepts, can you talk a little bit in terms of the concepts that you've included in the guide?
There's this book which I've read recently.
Yeah, I know it. Yeah. I'm a huge fan of Nicholas Taleb.
When you get a knock on the system, you very quickly see which parts of your system are fragile or not. In terms of your business model, suddenly can you operate without people on your premises? And so that's maybe the biggest piece of my realization in the guide, is that businesses need to be anti-fragile to survive and to thrive. And the financial system and understanding it at the moment, until we move on to Bitcoin or something, which I don't think will happen in a hurry, not in terms of day-to-day trading. It's an awesome way. And that 80-20 principle, it's definitely one of those leverages that can really help your business thrive and survive.
So can we just get stuck in there a little bit? Because I believe it's really important right now, if we look at the fact that we're sitting in a situation whereby we're confronted by challenges that we have never been confronted by before. Certainly not at this level of, global disruptive force, where everything from a socio-cultural and behavioral level is being changed. And so with regards to, Taleb also talks about in a previous book, these black swan events which happen every now and then, and which you cannot predict. There's no model that will forecast a black swan event. This is a black swan event, where we did not have the ability to create the structures to prevent this from happening, or to be able to withstand its impact. What do we do in response? From a financial perspective, and looking at creating an anti-fragile company, we obviously need to scramble now to respond, but what are some of the basic things that you could advise entrepreneurs and business owners to deploy within their own companies?
Yeah, it feels like there's two distinct phases. The one is managing this crisis, because if that isn't managed properly, you're not going to have a business. And that might be inevitable. Maybe as an entrepreneur, you're going to need to start a new business, because some industries are going to change so radically. I can't see, for example, the tourism industry being the same as it was like 2 weeks ago. I think a lot of those businesses are going to have to transform or close down, sure, or morph into something else. So in terms of managing the crisis, cash flow is one of the biggest constraints. So in order not to become insolvent, you have to keep the lights on. And so that the government has, in the president's speech, he's announced various measures, a lot of them focused on payroll. So giving you relief. Sometimes it's going to be a complete relief. Other times you're kicking the can down the road a bit by giving you a 20 delay in paying 20% of your PAYE. But I think what he's doing is right, because you need to keep cash in the hands of people who have it in order for them to keep their staff paid. And that's critical for South Africa, particularly the huge amount of people that live hand to mouth. For the entrepreneur, it's not just about the employees, because they've also got rent that's ticking over in the background, and their data connection and stuff, which for the next month, they're not going to be getting any return on. So they also have other cash flow constraints. So how do we sort out our cash flows in terms of how to raise money? Is instead of raising money, think of ways to slow down how quickly you spend the money. So a simple example is have a conversation with your suppliers and who are on 30-day terms, and just say, there's no ways I can pay you. I value the services. I'm only going to be able to pay you in 60 days or 90 days, and see where you can stretch that. So a lot of it's about relationships. Even customers, people don't think of customers as a source of revenue, but a lot of businesses approach their customers as partners in the beginning. So we're going to develop this awesome program. Why don't you give us R1 million up front and be a primary customer? We'll do some special tweaks for you, and you get them on board in the beginning to give you some money. So that's another way, is to approach your customers who are flush and just say, this is real hard times. Can you pay us the next 3 months in advance now? Is that possible? Can we do something like that? So it's really the first step is
the first real kind of concept that you're outlining now is communicate as frankly and as honestly and as clearly as possible to your creditors as well as your debtors, right?
Correct. So communicate straight away. But first think about what your strategy is around it, and which are your strategic partners in this, and then develop a communication strategy around that. But exactly right, communicate with them and ask for what you need. And sometimes you'll have to tell people, if you simply can't pay a supplier, you tell them, look, I can only pay you 90 days. And if if it means the end of that relationship, but it's going to save your business, those are decisions you kind of have to make. You have to weigh this stuff up now, because the reality is a lot of businesses live month to month in terms of cash flow. They maxed out on credit, and often very healthy businesses. I see super healthy businesses go down all the time. They're importing stuff and it's selling like gangbusters, and they're just growing and growing and growing. And next thing, they're just stretched. I mean, it's a great business, but they can't pay a few people. And then, all the sharks and the wolves move in and they close down. And
what is that? Because everyone says that growth is such a, it's such a dangerous thing, right? Can you define, just from a practical level, why should people be wary of that growth phase, and how can they mitigate against the dangers that occur within that growth phase?
Look, there's so many levels to this. So some of the more complex levels are getting an understanding of when to scale up your staff team depending on your growth. Because at some point you need to manage those 3 people that are looking after themselves. So that's a different conversation, and that's my recommendation would be to find a heavy chef who's done that. Find somebody who's experienced that. There's literature, and plan for that, because that can really hit you quite hard.
So a mentor of sorts, or potentially find a book written by somebody who's been through that, or papers or a blog post or a series of articles online, where somebody has really kind of been through that process and spoken about it, and you can learn from them, right?
Yeah, exactly. It'll kind of fall under the banner of scaling. It's one of the practical parts of scaling, is understanding how to increase your team, and when you are increasing it, how long would you outsource those skills for? Some people will say until you're paying twice a person's salary, you should outsource that, and then only at that point bring them in. But a much more simple and practical example is, let's say that you selling computer equipment and you're importing it from China, and you are distributing it around the country and selling it online, and it's just going amazingly. You've got this like niche fan that cools your whole life down and just stops making you angry as well. So you have to pay China up front. Okay, they're not going to give you terms very easily. So oftentimes you pay, say, a third or 50% when you place the order of a container, and then when it's on the water, you pay the other 50%. And that's awesome. You're growing, so you're going to sell those 2 containers. But now in South Africa, the people you're selling to are pushing you for 60 days, 90 days, and suddenly you have paid out this 5 million rand that you've earned. It's sitting in China, and there's stuff on the water. And then if there's a small downturn for a month, like now, suddenly you can't pay your rent, and yet you've got such a robust business model. But that doesn't matter, because when you run out of cash, no one cares. Your landlord and your internet's going to go off, and you can go and phone your internet provider and plead with them. But God, that's a practical example of the dangers of growth and the importance of managing cash flow like all the time.
So cash is king. I mean, that's essentially what we're saying here. We need to reserve and preserve your cash flow as much as possible. Yeah. And I mean, I think, are there any sort of hacks or tips or techniques that you can advise, particularly now, I mean, in full crisis management phase or mode that we're in at the moment? You know, there's a lot of people out there who are sitting with businesses that have just suddenly had the handbrake pulled out. What do you advise people who are now going through this crisis to immediately start doing?
The one that comes to mind, which I'm going to mention first, although it doesn't apply to everybody, is if your business model dies because of this, then just close down and get on with something new as soon as you can. Don't drag it into years, because this is your baby and it's like staying in a relationship for 2 years too long. And what's happening now is really going to change some businesses. The tourism industry is just going to be remarkably different. And I think in a month's time, we'll know whether certain levels of luxury travel are going to not happen for a few years, just like happened after 9/11. So if you're in that niche, start thinking about how to close down as a possibility. So if that's, just like smell the roses. If you're not sure, obviously you don't do that. You need to, just work. So the examples that I gave you of contacting your suppliers and customers for some relief, follow through with the links that are going up from the government in terms of relief that they're providing. Some of it's payroll related, some of it is in terms of specifically to the tourism industry, some is for manufacturing business. So those will be cash grants as well as loans. And for somebody with a robust business model, a loan is good enough, because you just want to see yourself through this time and then slowly be able to pay that back on very low interest over time. But at least that's a lifeline for you. So stay in touch with what's happening. I just posted a blog on my website at Simple Books last night, and I'm going to keep that updated in terms of links to how people can apply. And those are immediate things.
Cool.
But don't stick your head in the sand.
We'll link to those resources in this article as well, just to, because I think there's a lot of there's a lot of links and resources being thrown around social media in the media at the moment, and I think it would be really helpful to have a more pointed, focused guide to some of the resources that essentially are authoritative and can be trusted. Because there's a heck of a lot of fake news out there as well, and people, just going nuts on social media. That it's just so much nonsense out there, And then Phil, I wanted to get to, practically speaking. I mean, I think we'll go into more detail in a live Q&A session down the line when we launch the book. But for now, I mean, just some of the good hygiene aspects of managing your finances. Can you talk a little bit into the top line stuff with that? I mean, even though we're going into crisis mode, what are some of the habits that we need to still retain whilst bunkering down, battening down the hatches, and going through, first of all, these 21 days, but also, in the future as well?
One thing that South Africans are not great at compared to, so the context is that our practice, we've chosen Xero as the platform that we base our accounting business on. And what that's given us a window,
well, obviously,
right. So what that's given us a window into is what's happening in New Zealand, Australia, and the UK particularly, because they are a few years ahead of us. And it's amazing to see how the accounting industry has transformed there and how that's trickling down to us. So, for example, fees are very much outcomes based. You don't just bill for time. That's an old concept. So watching how small businesses operate in those countries is interesting. And one thing that South Africans are not great at is chasing money. So when you look at something we mentioned in the book, it's called debtor days. And it's a figure that tells you how many days it takes for you to recover money once you've authorized a sales invoice and sent it to somebody. And it's almost as those entrepreneurs don't think that's important. They get so busy on like trying to find money to pay their suppliers and like going out for the next business deal. But if you're doing that and not chasing people who owe you money, you really are like causing your own cash flow problems. So in this time, spend this time, have conversations. Everyone's going to be under financial pressure, so don't put on your hectic blouse and start sending out hectic emails. But engage everybody and just say, look, we're struggling in this time. We've closed like you have, and I see that your invoice is like a day late. You don't give them 2 weeks or 3 weeks. You say it's like there's no money in our account. Oh, can we expect it today, kind of thing. And so just get on people and make them aware, because when money does come in, they're going to pay you first because you're top of mind. So that's like a no-brainer, and everyone
That's
should.
That's such good advice, Philip, because I think so many entrepreneurs, it's like we've got work to do. We don't want to be chasing money, and to realize that chasing money is the work. To really make sure that the cash is in there. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to continue.
Yeah, exactly. There's so many of these very funny memes flying around. The one was, maybe this is the world just telling us to go to our rooms and think about what we've done.
Yeah.
And I really thought about it, sort of landed with me a bit. And I think it is really an opportunity for us to reflect on what we're trying to achieve in the world through our businesses, to reflect on our business models, because it's so frantic being an entrepreneur. This is an opportunity to take a step back, and instead of working so much in the business, to work on the business and just think like, what's working, where we're headed, how does this business align with what I want to achieve in the world, and so that's a massive opportunity.
And also what to stop doing, right? We tend to layer so many different things on top of our business, and it starts to become like this big amorphous mass of press stick that we just keep layering on top of more stuff that we do, and we just can't do any of it well. So we end up doing a lot of things super average. And I think this does also provide us with a beautiful opportunity to zero in on the things that we can do really well, and to do the things that are purpose-filled and meaningful. Because we have this perfect window now where we can say, you know what, we're going to stop doing these things, and nobody's going to question you for it.
Yeah, exactly. And along those lines, it's an opportunity to see how your work team needing to be at home has impacted your business, and ask yourself, like, why is that? We've been thinking of moving from a desktop-based system to Google Drive for the last 5 years, and now everyone's work is on their computers in the office, and you're thinking, well, maybe I should have done this, and maybe you should do that first thing when you get back to the office, or actually start that process now. Start looking at cloud-based systems that can really make you a remote team and give you access to your finances right now from home, instead of waiting till you get back and fire up your desktop and open that old piece of software, which I'm not going to mention here.
Side note question: do you believe that this is going to catalyze a sea change in global work behavior?
It's going to be very, very interesting to see. I think I can't see how it isn't going to. I think that a lot of the businesses that thought they needed people there, a lot of it is managers' fear of letting go and not being in control. They think everyone's going to skive off, just give them, and a lot of people will, but not everybody will. And if you set up systems and you, like for example, so my team, we talk on Slack all the time. If somebody drops off Slack, their little green light goes dark for like 3 hours. Everyone in the team knows, like, that person's gone to like watch their son play cricket, and that's cool. But if that happens every day, that's not cool. So it's not like people working from home become invisible. You've got to just really start setting outcome-based projects for your team, so you can just let them run with it, support them, give them communication tools where they feel part of the system. And I think if that can work in this time, I think it's going to change a lot of businesses' mindset about commuting and I think that's like one of the biggest evils of our time. So if people stop commuting, like I personally will just feel really happy about that.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. And I think the answer to the question is yes. I think people are going to suddenly have this beautiful lens on what the work environment can be like, and to instill a lot more of your individualized meaning and purpose into your work lives. And I think that's an amazing thing. So look, there's a lot of tragedy around the world at the moment, lots of fear and anxiety, but I do believe that through this, there will be a silver lining that we can extract after this period. I want to end off, Philip, just asking you a question. I mean, do you have any kind of top line advice? Maybe taking into account the advice that you're instilling in your own startup with Simple Books to our audience out there.
So our business has been remote. 75% of our team works remotely, and the other 25% come into office because they want to. So for us, it's been quite a seamless transition. So in that sense, it's harder for me to feel the pain of somebody who's doing it for the first time. But what I would suggest is some of the things that people should look out for with their remote teams is look at the different personalities of your team. The extroverts are going to struggle much more than the introverts. So encourage them to connect with each other, set up messaging systems, whether they're connecting on Zoom calls or on Slack or WhatsApp or whatever you can use, but check in with them regularly, because the extroverts really need to feel that they're still part of the team, and there's a lot of anxiety for them on being on their own. They recharge their batteries from being around other people. So manage that and encourage them to go for a walk, depending on what the rules are now, maybe go for a walk around the garden with your dog. There's one crew from the UK that does cloud integrations that we have some dealings with. He's recommended some games people can play online, like online Pictionary and stuff, that normally lunchtime when people would hang out together, give them tools to hang out together and let them still feel part of a team virtually.
All the managers out there are listening to you and going, like, they're just going to be playing games all day long, online Pictionary and so on. And I think, the reality is, let's trust in human nature. I think there will be some people who will take advantage of this in the wrong way, but I think mostly people are going to find their own groove. And as long as they are delivery driven and not structure driven, I think then we're going to see a very refreshing and healthy change in people's attitudes. Phillip Van Zyl, thank you so much for your time. Really, really appreciate it. We're going to be checking in again with you real soon, just to catch up and find out how things are going. And also just congratulations on all the hard work that you've done and releasing this book.
Thanks a million. If I can just give a few parting words. I was really moved by the president's speech. Really got a sense of him getting a feeling of how we're all in this together and how important small businesses and entrepreneurs are in terms of South Africa. And I think we will get through this together, and just need to do whatever we can and make difficult decisions. But it's not just everybody rush for the grants. If your business is robust and can survive this, and you're just going to take a loss, then do that and let the people that are on the verge of going under benefit from those grants, so that we can all kind of live to fight another day.
I couldn't agree more. Thank you, Philip, for those heartfelt words. And I think you're spot on. Yeah, we're going to get through this, no doubt.
Yeah.
Thank you, Phil.